So our trip up there to Mount Graham, we asked a lot of questions around that. And it was interesting how we were pointed back to another Jesuit. Many people may understand that Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope in history. But another famous Jesuit by the name of Malachi Martin, he was an insider of insiders, and he had a lot to say about what was happening on top of Mount Graham and what was happening in the Vatican, and his warnings, by the way, about what might happen if a Jesuit ever seized control of the Vatican. He wrote a book called The Jesuits, The Society of Jesus and the Betrayal of the Roman Catholic Church, and even though as a Jesuit, he had hoped that the things in that book wouldn't happen. Exactly what he has predicted has happened, and actually is happening with these recent announcements from the Vatican, in that he said that there was a secret war between the Jesuits and the other priests to take control of the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican in particular. Just recently, the New York Times published an article in which they said that heads were set to roll in Rome. Priests there are quietly speaking of 7 secret Jesuits who are working as spies for Petrus Romanus, and they want to use the power of Rome and the Vatican for reasons that are not yet clear to them. So is this setting up towards what you're implying, Steve, or is this encyclical? Are the people, the powers that be, being placed into the right positions there in the Vatican to support some kind of extraterrestrial theology? Well, Malachi said that the Jesuits would use the Vatican because it's not like any other Christian denomination. It's got 90 ambassadors parked there on any day at the Vatican City. It's got political relationships with most of the nations of the world. And Malachi said that's why the Jesuits wanted to seize control of the Vatican, so that they could use it as a machine, he said, that would give assistance to the rise of the New World Order. And he very specifically said they would use it to do the things that Pope Francis is doing now, a New World Order based on socialism, Marxism, and that they would work in tandem ultimately with the rise of the Antichrist for the implementation of the objectives of the Antichrist. But the second thing that he talked about is more to your point. So, if Malachi was absolutely correct in his predictions in his book, The Society of Jesus and the Betrayal of the Roman Catholic Church, you have to ask if he was also correct when he talked specifically about what was going on the top of that mountain, Mount Graham, in Arizona. It's about an hour away from Tucson, where the Vatican has an advanced telescope, and there's an observatory group that literally forced their way onto the top of that mountain. We tell the whole story about that in the book, in Extra Vaticana, how the Apache Indians, the other Indian tribes, sued them in federal court, tried to stop them, and actually took an act of Congress to overturn what both the environmentalists and the Indians there were trying to do so that they could get up on that mountain. But when Art Bell, some years ago, on Coast to Coast AM, was interviewing Malachi Martin, and he asked him very specifically, he said, "Father, why did the Vatican force themselves on the top of that mountain in Arizona, and why are they so heavily invested in the study of deep space?" And you will recall his answer at the time ignited a firestorm, because he said they are on the top of that mountain because at the highest levels of Vatican governance and geopolitics, they know what is approaching the earth and that it will be of the utmost importance in coming years. And he even put a decade timeline on his prediction. And what's astonishing then is if you look a decade later, actually almost to the date a decade later, in 2009, what happens? All of a sudden, the Vatican starts doing something the Vatican's never done before. They call for an astrobiology study week. They have the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, which, by the way, Francis just met with in secret this week. Is that a prelude to something that's coming up in either this or the next encyclical? Well, he's meeting with them. But those scientists for the Vatican, they came together, they brought together the most powerful astronomers in the world, geologists, theoretical physicists like work at CERN, but they also brought in theologians. And that whole week, they started discussing what they've never stopped discussing since, and that is, what would the impact on faith be, on religion be, given the disclosure or the discovery of advanced extraterrestrial intelligence in the universe? If we suddenly do what Steve Quayle has just asked, and tomorrow morning we wake up and all of a sudden it's on every major news station, Here's the President of the United States of America. Here's the presidents of Europe and China, Gog, Magog, and they're standing there, and right in front of them is Petrus Romanus, the final pope on the 800-year-old prophecy of the Catholics, and he is saying, we have an announcement to make. We are in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Or we have an announcement to make. They're here.
It's going to be interesting, Sheila, the fact that the deception is going to be so great. And we think we've seen great deception. We've only seen the beginning of it. But what's playing out now, it's not the staircase to heaven. It's a spiral staircase to hell. And I think that what Malachi Martin was talking about, and obviously the Windswept House, the Keys to His Blood, all the different books that he wrote, it's fascinating that he made the statement that Satan is enthroned in the Vatican.
Absolutely right. And you said something about a staircase to heaven or a staircase to hell. I think that was something else that he understood about Mount Graham and never got a chance to write about. Malachi was working on what he said was going to be his most explosive book when all of a sudden somebody pulled his feet out from under him in his own house and he fell down a stairway, went into a coma, and later died. That's something, when he came out of that coma momentarily, he told one of his priest friends that something or somebody had pulled his feet out from under him. And he fell down the stairway and went into a coma. And then what happened? He wakes up out of the coma, but who are his visitors? Is he being protected by police protection? I don't know what's happening. All of a sudden, he dies. His buddy just before that, Kunz, you remember, he was also a conservative Catholic. He was warning about the danger of the Jesuits invading the Vatican. What happens to him? He doesn't fall down no staircase. He's found with his throat slit from ear to ear. And satanic sacrifices were found not too far from the church that he pastored that were eerily similar to the ones described by Malachi Martin and those satanic rituals in his book. So there was definitely something that was going on there, and the purpose of it was to close the mouth of those men that were warning about who it was that wanted to take over the Vatican and what they intended to do and how they intended to use the Vatican as a vehicle for the emergence of the new world order. But back to the question about the staircase to heaven or hell, that was one of the things that Chris Putnam and I were amazed to discover when we come down off of Mount Graham. So we go up to Mount Graham. In the back of our mind is Malachi Martin. Malachi Martin says that they're using the Vatican's advanced technology telescope on the top of that mountain to watch something, to monitor something, he said, that is approaching the earth, and that it would be of the utmost importance in the coming years. So we go up there. We ask the different Jesuits that are on the top of that mountain, and we record some of the stuff that they told us inside of our book. We go from there up to the large binocular telescope that's also part of that observatory group on the top of that mountain, where the Lucifer device is. And we get unprecedented access. The technician was the top technician for the Large Binocular Telescope, the LBT, and he spent the day with us, hours. And we have video film of us going up and down all 7 floors of that amazing device. In fact, there were some French astronomers who were there at the time, and they were making some adjustments on the Large Binocular Telescope. It's the largest telescope of its kind in the world. But again, when we went on the top of that mountain, we had thought that the Native American Indians at the bottom of the mountain, that they had fought the Vatican and NASA and the Arizona State University to keep them from going on the top of that mountain. We thought that was true because they considered it holy ground. And then what we found out was that was not the case, that the indigenous people, the Apaches especially, they oppose the Vatican going on to the top of that mountain because they believe that mountain is a stargate. It's that stairway you're talking about to heaven or hell. And based on that, by the way, Chris Putnam and I are going back, if he can. And this is something that you and I will also do some work together on. We have upcoming programs on both your television program that's going to be launched, also the Skywatch television.
That Balducci was assassinated, I believe, based on great information that obviously Father Malachi Martin was. But Balducci was basically, as an exorcist, I believe, when people look into him, his ability to discern the devil, to deal with the devil, and whether you like him or not, somebody thought he knew something that the world couldn't know at that point, so they offed him. they murdered him, they assassinated him.
Tom, I want you to get into that. But when you connect the dots on combining the UN with the church, and there's a kind of this system developing right before our eyes, a veil about to emerge, so to speak, as a Revelation 13 beast, the man on the scene, the man of the year, who is the world in love with right now, and who's the one talking about baptizing aliens? It really seems that what we're talking about here is not only the Vatican's astonishing plan for the arrival of an alien god, but so they can ease us into a case where those are the ones that we came from, whether it is these cryptid hybrid beings, aliens, demons. We're already, Steve, as you just talked about stargates, we're seeing them opening all around the world. There's dimensions, gateways, portals. When you see all this culmination of prophecies coming together, and then you think about Father Malachi Martin warning that the Vatican would be secretly establishing a political world economic plan, it's a culmination of everything coming together, is it not, Tom?
Absolutely is. And, you watch that remake of the film The Day the Earth Stood Still, and the aliens are coming. Why? Because of our environmental damages, what the Pope is calling human ecology and others are calling human ecology, the greening of the planet. Us gas-guzzling, beer-drinking, fat humanoids are doing so much damage to this sentient being called Gaia, the Earth, as a living, essentially it's ancient goddess worship, that we need to be stopped. And so is that why this Savior will appear? Is he going to take up the Pope's new green gospel? Is he going to say that we've been damaging the Earth and hurting the Earth, and the Earth is actually alive, and we don't know what we're doing, and so we're going to be forgiven of our ignorance, but we have to cease and desist immediately?
How much of Christendom is going to embrace the alien Savior, and especially now, Sheila, that ecumenism is the order of the day, and the Pope is bringing together the Protestants, and charismatic leaders are buying into this faster than it seems like anybody else. So the point is that the stage is set for the man of peace to walk on the stage. To quote the United Nations spokesman, give us a man who will give us peace, and be he God or be he the devil, we'll worship him. So the point is that the whole world wonders after the beast.